the review of agenda. Is there any question or item on consent that council would like to ask about? Seeing none, any special concerns? In our normal and well-organized world today, does anybody have a concern at all? Are you waiving, Councilor Linville, or did you want to say something?
Well, I have some comments, but I don't know whether if it's appropriate for me to say them now, or if I save them to my report in the council meeting.
I think that you can save them unless there's something you need response to before then.
Save them? Is that what you said?
Yeah, unless there's something you need a response to before you get to that point. All right, why don't we ask you to save them if we could. We're going to run a little late here. Anybody else on a concern or agenda item? I don't see any, so let's move to our pre-count work session items, starting with our Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. Mr. Loomis.
Mr. Brashear.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I was going to wait for Dwight Brashear to get settled there.
There he is. There he is. All right.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Dwight Brashear. I am your transit director, and I have Eric Loomis joining me via Zoom, and we are here to present this evening on the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. I think it's important to understand that the timing on this is just coincidental. This plan, the FTA has been working on this probably 12 years, going back to my time in Washington, D.C. There were some large agencies having safety issues, and the federal government, the FTA, decided that it was necessary that these large agencies develop a safety plan. Through a lot of discussion, it was determined that all transit agencies needed to develop a safety plan. And so we were faced with this. Now, probably about 2 years ago, we were told that by July of 2020, all agencies would be required to have an adopted safety plan. And so we went to work with ODOT. ODOT hired a consultant at their cost, and so it didn't cost SMART anything, which is something I like a lot. And so we worked with this consultant now for not quite a year, but again, the timing on it is such that it would appear that it has much to do with COVID-19 and the threat therein, but it really has nothing at all to do with COVID. It really is just the timing on it. So I think it was necessary for me to kind of lay that out in the beginning so that there is no expectation. If you've read through the plan, it doesn't mention COVID or any of those types of threats at all, because that wasn't really how it was meant to be. We followed a very strict template that was designed by the federal government, and we were guided through it by the consultant that ODOT hired. So with that, I will turn it over. Well, I think we've got, let's see here. Just kind of an overview. I talked about the history and the development working with the ODOT consultant. In this very quick presentation, Eric will talk about the requirements of the plan and that we were very mindful that we meet all the requirements, and then he'll talk a little bit about the components of the plan. So we'll get through this. So I'll turn it over to Eric Loomis, who is our operations manager. Eric?
Thank you, Dwight. Yeah, so as Dwight mentioned, the plan goes back to MAP 21, Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century, and then again in the FAST Act that Congress approved. So before then, it was still required for transit agencies with rail to provide some sort of safety plan. Since then, through these two acts of Congress, we now have to, as a transit agency, small or large, provide a safety plan. So working with ODOT and their consultants, RLS and Associates, we took some other documents that we've had in the past, a safety security emergency preparedness plan, as well as a safety systems program plan. Took those components, put it where it fit into this PTAS plan, as well as some of the SMS components, the safety management systems components that I'll go over here shortly. Go ahead and next slide, please. So the requirements of this plan stem mostly from the system management system, or the safety management system. That's where most of the components come from. They include several areas here. Safety management policy, the safety risk management, safety assurance, and then safety promotion as well. And then the investment in safety would be our training, our policies and procedures, and then we also have a safety program that the city provides, a safety incentive program for that. And so here we have a picture. You may have seen it before. It's all of our operators and everyone that came to our rodeo last year. That's one of our big training events we do annually. And really, the reason I chose this picture was just because this PTAS safety plan is really a team effort. It involves everyone. It takes everyone to run a safe system. Ultimately, it stops with Dwight, our director. However, everyone has their role to play in this. And it's really important for us to train our employees to make sure that they have the tools that they need when they're out on the road or in the dispatch office or in the maintenance facility. Or even in the yard, to be able to identify safety hazards, report those safety hazards properly and efficiently and timely, and for us to respond to those reports. So that's what this plan is about. It's a very high overview of those statements. And yeah, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So really the components, there's a performance target. That is a national performance target based off of National Transit Database information. So that is in our plan. Sorry, I didn't mention that our plan starts on page 8 in the packet that you have for tonight's meeting. The performance targets are in the plan. They include any fatalities, injuries, safety events, and system reliability that has happened throughout the year, and that's what we report to the NTD database. Our system reliability is one we look closely at. That's any disruption in service. So if a bus is taken out of service, that's something where it goes off of every 100,000 miles we look at. And we are above average on both our demand response and fixed route as compared to the rest of the nation on that one. We also look at safety performance monitoring and measurement. Accident and incident reporting and statistics is a big part of that. So anytime we have an accident or incident that's reported or a near miss that's reported, we take that information. If we see a trend happening, we we add training to minimize or mitigate those issues, those hazards that come up. And then risk assessment and mitigation development. So we have a hazard identification analysis, and then a tracking matrix to review those hazards. And this is something the drivers can fill out, dispatch, fleet, any employee at SMART can fill this analysis out, turn it into a supervisor, and we can assess it and determine where that hazard sits and what we can do to mitigate that. And then again, I mentioned the safety promotion. Training is a huge part of that. I mentioned the rodeo. We also have an all staff annually. And then as well as quarterly safety meetings that we bring every driver in, dispatcher in to do those meetings. I know Fleet does a monthly safety meeting that they go over up-to-date topics, current events and everything going on. And then refresher training. If someone has been here for 10 or 15 years, they may not be trained on every piece of equipment we have. So we ensure that all employees have refresher training. And then again, the city safety point program, where it's incentives for employees who have a safe record month to month. They accrue safety points that they can use for other benefits. So that's what I had for the PTASP. Is there any questions?
Well, Counsel, any questions we'd like to ask our transit people? Councilor Akabal.
I had a question about, first of all, thank you. Thanks for the presentation and for including the plan and all the material in our packet. I had a question about the table that is on page 23 of our packet. Let's see. I'm not sure what number on the plan specifically. Oh, looks like page 16 of the plan specifically. And I wondered, is this the matrix then that you were referring to kind of when you're doing the risk assessment and reporting? Does it then get plugged into this matrix and then that is used to determine what the mitigation plan might be, and as well as the monitoring or kind of performance or reporting,
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the table, and that's a standard table we took from TSI, Transportation Safety Institute, the training class, the federal training that they do. That's the table they recommended, so we just took it out of their template. I've used it before in the past. So yeah, we're familiar with it.
Okay.
It's great. It's very generalized, so you can use it on a crack in the sidewalk or a branch of buses brushing up against, or basically any type of hazard that comes our way.
Okay, great, thank you. And so then will it be tracked like monthly or annually or whatever it is, how many occurrences might happen in each category, so you'd be able to see over time what the shape of the operations are? Is that the general idea then?
Yeah. So the plan is an annual plan, which I might have forgotten to mention. That reason we're here is to seek approval from Council, and then we'll send it on to ODOT for final approval before it goes to the FTA. But yes, so as they come in, as hazards come in, if any employee fills out that report form, we'll review them at that point, make a decision, but then it will go into the matrix that will be reviewed quarterly and then annually as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification on that.
Other questions? Councilor Linville.
I just want to congratulate you on the thoroughness of the plan. I think it speaks to really all of the areas and processes, I think, for improvement. And so I just wanted to commend you on that. I would be very interested as you use this plan to report back and find out where, because I think your goals are really well stated and measurable, and so it'll be interesting to see when you report back on the plan. But well done. It's a very comprehensive plan.
Well, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. We will definitely, obviously, be back in a year to get an approval for the next plan, as we will every year. So we can definitely bring some statistics from previous years.
Other questions? Just for council's benefit, I gave Mr. Bashir a heads up earlier today that, the only thing that came to my mind was a question about whether in today's environment we would want to have any kind of a window or place that might account for either pandemic kind of related issues or social unrest issues in terms of what might happen at some point. And so I didn't know if you would want to comment on that now.
Yes, and Eric and I spoke about that shortly after you and I spoke, Mr. Mayor. So, and Eric had some really pointed ideas about how to address those, whether, we wanted to amend the plan at some point or have a separate plan for that. Eric, can you talk a little bit about our conversation?
Yeah, and even after that, I reviewed some places where it might be able to input some of that information. And really, looking through this plan, we could certainly mention pandemic or epidemic, but it's a very large-scale plan, generalized plan where it tries to fit everything in it. And so really what we could do with COVID-19 is put it through the hazardous analysis and determine which we have, not using this formal document, but we put PPE in place, engineering in place, and really that was more of on the city level than just SMART, given the situation we're in. But that's something we would use this plan for, is something like COVID-19, not necessarily including in the plan that we need to prepare for that, but here's a hazard that came up, it needs to go through this plan to make determinations.
Okay, good. Anything else? It's not on our formal adoption for tonight, correct? It'll be at a future meeting?
Correct. We want to, first time you've seen this document, we want to make sure that there weren't any large corrections.
Right. All right. I'm not seeing anybody jumping out of their seat, so I think everybody's probably good to go.
All right. Well, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much for your work on this. We'll see you back in front of council with it.
Thanks.
Brings us to our integrated pest management discussion, if we could.
It says you have 20 minutes, but really you have 12.
12.
Great.
All right, well, good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name's Carrie Rappold. I'm the city's Natural Resources Manager. And with me here tonight also is Mike McCarty, the city's Parks and Recreation Director, and Delora Kerber, the Public Works Director. We form the leadership team for the Integrated Pest Management Plan. So we're here tonight to, I'll be giving the presentation, but Mike and Delora are available for any questions that you might have, especially if they're specific to their departments. All right. So I thought I'd just start. I'm not sure how much you remember in terms of, we gave a presentation, about a year and a half ago when we first adopted the IPM plan. That was in September of 2018. Actually, yeah, about a year and a half ago. And so I just wanted to go back through and just give you a little information in regards to what does integrated pest management mean. And basically, it's an approach to controlling weeds and pests and, things that arise out in those spaces that we manage, whether they be around a building, in a park, any type of setting that we have that we manage. So it's an approach that uses different practices, and they fall into 4 broad categories. There's the cultural, there's the mechanical, there's the biological, and then there's the chemical. And I'll go through those a little bit more in terms of what those mean. So I did that, biological, and Basically, with the chemical controls, we're going to be looking at those other 3 categories of controlling pests, whether they're cultural, mechanical, or biological. And we're going to go to those first in terms of seeing if they're effective and seeing if they're the best approach in terms of controlling what we're dealing with. But we do still have situations where chemicals do have to be used. We've worked very hard to try to reduce the use of toxins or chemicals. We're hoping in future reports we're going to have more data that we can share with you in terms of showing how this reduction has taken place. Before I forget also, the Ipm plan was actually a requirement of our Bee City USA designation. So it was something that we adopted that designation in 2017. And we spent the subsequent year trying to develop the plan and implementing it. So this year is actually, or last year was the first year that we've actually had a full year of implementing the plan. So basically, there's a number of goals that were adopted with the plan. And, we certainly put the health of the environment, is something that's very important. But we also want to minimize the risk to human beings. One thing you'll see is that when, we have areas that are actively used, we try to reduce the amount of, certainly chemicals that are used in those areas. We want to have the least amount of exposure in terms of people that are frequenting in those areas. But we're also looking at, issues of cost effectiveness and, what we could do in the short and long term. So it's continually a process of revisiting what we're doing and trying to, find the best approach in terms of what makes the most sense, what is, going to have the most efficacy and the most effectiveness in terms of what we're doing. So I just wanted to go through what these practices mean in terms of, the cultural, the mechanical, and the biological. One of the most important things, I don't want to put the goats up yet because everybody loves those. One of the most important things is that we are out there actively monitoring what we're seeing. And as far as responding to that, there's something that's called early detection and rapid response. We just recently had a weed that was discovered over at the water treatment plant park. And we have a very good partnership with the Clackamas Soil and Water Conservation District. They actually do quite a bit of monitoring in our city for us and find these weeds, and introduce us to species that may not have even seen before. So in that case, we try to jump on that immediately and do something that, can bring immediate control so that doesn't become a much greater issue. Like I said, we've used the goats in the past. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get a company in the last couple years to work with. The problem with goats is that they only really work when the weather's dry. So if you have to keep them over winter, it's very expensive to keep them. And that's why it's hard to find goats to do the work. But if I can find another company again, I'm going to do it again. We use things like bark dust around landscape areas that can control weeds. We have a device called a weed burner. I know that Public Works has used that on sidewalks and other locations where it makes sense. We don't really do as much of the biological control, but if we were to do some of that, it would involve predatory insects, such as things as like ladybugs, that might be effective in controlling something that we're seeing out in the environment. Mechanical removal is definitely something that we go to quite a bit in terms of, using it for controlling weeds, Himalayan blackberry. It has, a lot of effectiveness in terms of doing that. Irrigation management, our turfs that we have within our parks, there's a lot that we can do in terms of managing that system, in terms of controlling the water and having good soil in terms of where that turf is growing. And that includes things like mowing and aeration. Plant nutrition also can be an important component of that. And then tree management in terms of pruning trees, making sure that they're healthy so that they're able to, withstand any type of disease or insect or something that might affect them. So now I'm going to just briefly go through the report. First of all, I just want to acknowledge the assistance that we got from a couple people. Bill Evans, our public information officer, he actually formatted and edited the report. We gave him actually very little direction in some respects in terms of how he did this, and I think he did a really great job with what he's put together here. Also, Andy Sheehan with the Public Works, he compiled the data that's in the report. And like I said, we're just really really starting to get more effective with the data that we're gathering. So I'm hoping in future years that we can have more data that goes into the report, and we can show actually, these reductions, especially in terms of chemical usage. So the report has some of the same things that I just described to you in terms of the goals for our plan, the practices. It shows, some of these common pests that we're dealing with, whether it's a rat or a cockroach or Himalayan blackberry. They can fall into a lot of different categories. We're always looking for something innovative in terms of how we do this type of work within the community. This actually is something that we've just recently purchased. Parks and Recreation bought this. It's a steam weeder, and it actually uses steam that's at 250 degrees, and it's put out at a gallon a minute, and it has a superrated or supersaturated steam content, and they're finding that it's fairly effective already, but it does require repeated treatments. I think it's on like a 3-week schedule when they do this as far as treating areas. We're also still very dependent on some of the volunteer work that we have in the community, like, the workday and other events that we have that uses volunteers. And then, like I said, we wanted to put at least this year some information in here about the data that we've already collected in terms of the practices we use. And you can see from this chart that, basically, if you look at cultural and mechanical controls, we're working with, about 5 times the acreage that we do with chemical controls. So we're hoping to see those numbers on the left-hand side keep growing year after year, and the numbers on the right-hand side hopefully decreasing year after year, so we can provide the safest community, that we can. So that's about it. I wanted to keep it pretty brief. I think Brian said we only had about 12 minutes, so, but we're here for any questions that you may have about the plan or about the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from council, starting with Councilor Agrawal, I see. Then we'll have Councilor Lehan.
Hi, thank you for the presentation, and it's great to see this, the report for 2019, and it'll be good to see, how things develop, and as you said, the data. I'm interested in the data too, how that will trend over time. I was particularly interested in the table that you had there in the presentation that's also included with the blue and orange bars. And it's kind of an intriguing chart because it appears to be measuring 2 different things, both the number of acres, in these 2 different categories, as well as the labor hours. So it's almost like a dual axis, because we're measuring those 2 different things. But I wondered if the intent then was to have, make the relationship between those 2 metrics, the labor hours and the acres, to draw, a tie between those 2 metrics. And the thing that was kind of, I was curious about is when I was looking at that, there were 632 labor hours kind of serving the 310 acres that was under the cultural mechanical section, which is, I don't know, I'm thinking it's about like a 2-to-1 relationship, right? So you have about 2 labor hours for every acre. But then when we were looking at the chemical controls, it was 374 to 65 acres. So that's a much higher ratio. So that's almost 5 or 6 labor hours for every acre. And my assumption would have been that the chemicals would have been a quicker, you would move through the work quicker with the chemicals or something, And so I was really curious about what was going on there, and if there was, more clarification behind what we're seeing there. Why is that? And then, of course, like you mentioned, I will be eager to see the chemical controls numbers decrease over time, probably, for many reasons. Putting the chemicals into the community spaces, but then also when I'm seeing that the labor hours is higher in those areas. I was just curious, how does that all work out?
Well, I think I'm going to ask Mike and Delora maybe to weigh in on this too, but I would imagine that, you know, there's a lot of prep work that goes into using chemicals. You have to mix those. You have to, you know, take a lot of safety precautions in terms of how you use those. And, you know, I think in contrast to if you're using a mower, I mean, certainly you have to put gas in it and you have to do some things with that. But I think there's a lot more man hours that are involved with, you know, logging what you're doing with the chemicals, ensuring that you're doing it properly, and it just takes time to do that. And so I think, you know, it's a good point that you've made, that I think it is representative of the time and effort that's required to use a chemical in some respects versus a cultural or mechanical practice. But if you have something to add, Delora.
So, hello, Delora Kerber, Public Works Director behind this name. Anyway, Carrie is correct. When it comes to chemical application, it is very pointed, it is very specific. So as staff walks through, literally they're just walking through point spraying as needed. Whereas some of the mechanical measures that you see there are more like rough mow, where they're on a mower and they're cruising through. They are doing weed whacking. They're doing the type of activities that you can do a large area in a shorter amount of time because you're moving through it more rapidly.
Thank you. That makes sense. And then that also makes me wonder, like for the 65 acres, because that was my understanding that I guess that was our practice, to be very pointed in the use of the chemicals and not do generic spraying. But how do we calculate the acreage then when it is very pointed applications?
So the way we capture the information in our asset management work order program is staff goes out and say there's a landscape bed that they're doing chemical applications. So they're tracking the amount of time that they're doing it. They're working in that bed. And they're also tracking the amount of chemicals that they're applying in it, the ratio. It's a lot of information that we have to report to the state. It has to do with when they're doing chemicals. So what will happen is in 100 square feet, and then they'll have a calculation. And then sometimes within the same 100 square feet, they have to come back for a reapplication if appropriate.
And just, I know when Andy compiled this data, he had to take all of that information that was in square footage and then compile it and then put it into acres. So it's all, you know, done that way.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Lehan next, and then Councilor Linville.
Yes, I have seen on different news things from other places that with the COVID deal, those steam machines are being used for other than weed control. Have we considered that at all? In other words, they are sterilizing playground equipment and benches and things like that. They run over them with a steam thing, and it's very effective at killing everything. So, killing viruses, certainly.
We have not, Counselor, mostly, well, we haven't thought about it, and it sounds like a good idea, but mostly because the governor's orders don't allow playground structures to be open right now.
Yeah, but we do have benches, and we do have tables that I presume are being used in our parks, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's certainly something we can look at. We have not used it for that purpose yet.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I just noticed that other cities are doing that, and other than that, I just really would, I mean, the numbers I still am interested in are, you know, number of pounds of whatever. How many pounds of glyphosate are we putting on each year, and is that number going up or down? I presume we're headed in that direction, but haven't seen that.
Yeah, we have all of that information. So within the asset management system, they record the actual, pesticide or herbicide that they're using. And so we were thinking for next year's report, we'll have more information. And I think that would be, an interesting thing to add, to at least have a little bit more in terms of those chemicals and showing what the trend is.
Yeah, because it's not just not just how much we purchased, but how much we used. Because I understand you might purchase enough for a couple of seasons or something, but we'd like to know season by season, really. I think it would be nice to know season by season. Is it mostly that we feel like we need more glyphosate in the summer? Is it mostly in the spring? Where are we? Anyway, that's what we had discussed before, was how do we get that total poundage down year by year as we gradually increase our other methods. So that's what I think is most important for us to monitor.
Sure, I would agree. We all want to see that trend line going in that direction.
Because, and I'll just throw in part of my perspective on this because I didn't see it in the list of things. Well and good to save pollinators, but as I say to people on the insecticide side, with no bugs, you'll have no birds. You don't go out and kill bugs randomly because lots of species eat those. And so you're taking away somebody's dinner. And I'm very concerned about the soil health, the long-range microbes in the soil, and that's what dumping, poundages of chemicals on the ground, then it's in the soil, and how has it changed that? So that's the reason for us prioritizing reduction of that, is we have a lot more to think about than just pollinators.
Sure.
Okay, we should move along. Thank you for that. Councilor Linville?
Well, I just have a quick question, and it has to do with tree spraying and primarily for insects. And I'm wondering if the city does the spraying, or do we have a program of tree spraying? And if so, does the city do the spraying, or do we hire the spraying out to a commercial company? And if we do hire it out to a commercial company, is it included in the amounts in the report in terms of the acreage and the hours for the chemical applications?
Do you want to handle that one, Delora?
Well, so I couldn't address the how much we spray of the trees. I can tell that the trees along the roadway, we don't really spray unless there is a specific problem. Typically, then we would hire a company. Any chemical application done by a third party is that, we make sure that they are tracking per the state requirements of what it is they're doing, where, when, et cetera. Does that answer your question?
So those numbers probably don't show up in this report. They would be separate somewhere.
Yeah, the actual amount would show up separate. What we do is we do track the invoices, in which then we could go back and pick up the amount. Yes.
Councilor West, did you have a question?
The tone of the report, I think, captures the spirit of our goal here, and that's to be effective, but be very good stewards of the environment along the process. And I share Councilor Lehan's concerns about the chemicals. So I just had a couple questions around that and comments around it. So when we were going through our packet, I did a little research and then thought about some things, but nationally about 45 million, excuse me, nationally about 45 million pounds of pesticides are just in home and gardens around America. And we know that the pest control chemicals have been linked to health problems like cancer, birth defects, neurological problems, and studies have shown that children are particularly vulnerable for these, and also ties into John Hopkins lymphoma. So with that said, we know that that's a problem. I have a couple questions that I jotted down here. More specifically, is it possible to just not use the chemical pesticides? And then my other question is do any other municipalities have creative ways to not use pesticides or to really minimize it that we can learn from, or do they have any creative ideas coming out there? And then if we do use them, where are we specifically using the pesticides? And then are there certain species where it's like we just don't have a very green way to deal with that, or we're doing the best we can, we still have to rely on this chemical? Just a little more detail about how that decision is made.
Can we provide those answers to you in writing? We're way behind. Is that okay?
Yes, totally. I would love that in writing. Yes,
got your 3 questions. We'll respond and copy everybody on council, and then if we need to dialogue about this at our next meeting in June, we certainly can, but we're way behind.
All right, sounds good. Let's move to the wastewater testing, and maybe we can do that fairly quickly.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I can talk it through fast. If you could set it up. Yep. Okay. All right, well, I'm going to start talking while we get the PowerPoint up, just to save a little time. So the city is currently participating in a pro bono project with BioBot Analyticals. This is a company that they do a lot of testing having to do with sewage, related to not only this, the COVID, but they look at antibiotics, they look at, other, here, I'll just cruise on through. Whoop. There you go. Whoa. Maximize that. Yeah, I'm missing something. And how do I advance? Okay, but then, oh, there we go. Got it. I was thinking it was a PowerPoint. All right, there we go. So the company does a lot of various different types of testings, and it's amazing what you can find in your effluent, or influent rather, from your wastewater treatment plant. And so this company, made up of these 3 individuals, they have wastewater-based epidemiology. And they decided during COVID that they would do this pro bono program where they would offer to do testing of wastewater for up to 400 different municipalities and do it at a discounted rate of only $200 per testing, which is a really good deal. Actually $120 per testing. And so the city of Wilsonville decided to join in on it, along with that I know of in the state as Clean Water Services, McMinnville, Bend, Florence, Eugene, and Albany. There could be additional agencies that are participating in this. Anyway, so nationwide, they have over 400 wastewater treatment plants, 42 states. They're capturing 10% of the population. And what they're trying to figure out is that looking at the COVID virus, basically it sheds itself into your stool, and then it goes into the sewage. And so what they do is we send them samples, and then they test it to see if they can detect. Now they have limits of detection, and what they have to look at is like how many known cases are in the vicinity. So there's a lot about how they go about it. It's in your packet. You can read about it, all sorts of fun stuff. So they have the sewer testing, the lab, and then we get the report. And then just more info. I took these slides from them directly, so it was a lot of their information. But at the end of the day, this is what we get, is a form. So the city of Wilsonville, as I mentioned, has participated in the 4 weeks in May, and we've only received one of our test results back from the week of May 6th, because they're really backed up because everybody thought this is a great idea. But what we found is in that particular one is that we came back as a non-detect. But at the time of the testing, there was only 235 25 cases in all of the county. And so what they recognize is the fact that when you're flowing almost 200 million gallons of water and you're searching for a particular virus shed, you may or may not capture it. And so at least in the first testing, we did not see anything. But what I'm doing is reaching out to other agencies in the county to see if they're doing the testing, and we might be able to aggregate our information. So let's see, the calculation of how they come up with it, and then they normalize their information. So we're going to continue on to see how the next 3 tests comes back. And then if we want to continue on after June 1, the price now is going to be going back to what the actual price is, which is $1,200 per test. So we're going to wait to see how the other tests come back to see if we get something more than a non-detect. There you go.
All right, very interesting. I think that we'll just kind of wait for more discussion after we get a little further into that protocol, if we could do that.
All righty.
Thank you. Let's move to the Community Enhancement Program, if we could.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Zoe Monahan. I'm the Assistant to the City Manager. And this evening, I'm here to seek your approval for Resolution 2813 in the regular meeting for an addendum to the Intergovernmental Agreement between the City and Metro for the Community Enhancement Program. The addendum will allow a 1-year extension to the existing IGA. Due to COVID-19, Metro has suggested a 1-year extension to the current IGA, and we can negotiate a longer-term agreement next year when we're not in the middle of a pandemic. The program allows the city to put money back into the community for projects that meet the goals set out within the IGA, such as resulting in improvements to or an increase in recreational areas and programs, resulting in improved safety, or benefits to youth, seniors, low-income persons, underserved populations, and other goals as well. The program is funded by tipping fees. We receive $1 for every ton of wet waste processed by our public services in Wilsonville. And over the past 5 years, the program has allocated over $320,000 to projects. Approximately 20 projects have been awarded funds. The program continues to evolve. With the committee's support, we were able to update the application process and review process this year. And we also did some direct outreach to increase the amount of applications from the community. We received 9 applications this year. However, the applications were not reviewed due to COVID-19. The committee was set to meet in March, and they are now hoping to meet in June to determine how we move forward this year. I would be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, it is on consent.
So thank you very much. I sit on that committee, and I think Councilor Linville has joined in what former Councilor Stevens was doing there, and it's been a good group in my experience. I am looking forward to seeing applications for this year. The applications have tended to run a quite wide range of different ideas, and I think that that's one of the intriguing things about it. So any questions from anyone here? We've got 2 of our board and commission appointments on our board and commissions for tonight, which are reappointments to existing members that would like to continue on that committee. So we will get to that here a little bit later under mayor's business. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And that will then bring us to a addition to our agenda, a restaurant outdoor seating program with Mr. Vance.
Okay, thank you. I should be getting. All right, good evening. This is Jordan Vance, Economic Development Manager, and I'm here tonight to give a brief presentation on a new city initiative to support restaurants and expanded outdoor seating during the summer months. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
All right. So I'm Jordan Vance, Economic Development Manager, and I'm here tonight to give a brief presentation on a new city initiative to support restaurants with expanded outdoor seating during the summer months that we're tentatively calling Eat Out Wilsonville. Clackamas County entered phase 1 of reopening last week, which means many restaurants in Wilsonville will start to reopen with new guidelines which require restaurants limit their space to 50% capacity and maintain 6-foot distancing with tables and customers. It's a very dire time right now for restaurants, given decreased revenue by over 50%, plus increased costs related to cleaning and sanitation. So as a way to help local businesses increase their customer capacity, the city is offering a flexible, expanded outdoor seating program over the warm weather months. The program will expedite review of requests and waive all fees. As long as ADA access and circulation are maintained, along with adherence to OHA and applicable county standards, requests should be approved. The program will be promoted with the Chamber of Commerce and highlighted in a reopening webinar hosted by the city and chamber tomorrow morning. Businesses can find information on the program on the city's COVID-19 resource page. We don't have many restaurants along our pedestrian streets, so the proposals we are likely to see may not include public streets, but could include parts of shopping centers, where the property owner has the ability to transform parking space into parklets and add expanded outdoor seating in the public right-of-way, as long as access, circulation, and ADA are maintained. Following are a couple of renderings that show possible scenarios that could be requested on public or private property. These were produced by Peabot in Portland and are just illustrative. We can't guarantee all requests, but we'll do our best to maintain circulation while accommodating these types of requests, realizing that hopefully they are mostly temporary during the pandemic. For some reason, the visuals didn't show up in the presentation.
Probably the security.
Okay. Enable content. Oh, here it is. Okay. All right, so here's just a couple scenarios that we wanted to share, created by Peabot. So here's an example of a curbside zone use. So this would be limited, expanded outdoor seating. This example shows a neighborhood plaza. So this is more of an expanded outdoor neighborhood plaza. This seems to be more of the direction Portland is looking at with weekend open air European style street fairs on their commercial streets. This next one is a mini neighborhood plaza. This is similar to the last, but a little bit scaled back. And then this last example is a full Main Street closure. So this is more along the lines of the street fair open air concept. Again, I just wanted to reiterate that these scenarios are illustrative and we can't guarantee all requests, but we'll do our best. This concludes my presentation and I'll now open it up for questions.
Thank you. Counsel, any questions about this idea that looks like we're going to explore? I'm pleased to see us being innovative and proactive about ways to maybe help support some of our business community, and it will be exciting and could be a lot of fun if we can make some of these really work.
I think Councilor West had his hand up.
Councilor West, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
That's okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Brian, thank you for and your staff for being so responsive to this issue. I know that we talked briefly on the phone about this, and I really want to give a shout out to the Chamber for finding creative ways to add advocate for the business community, especially those portions of our economy that may be more impacted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we've known for weeks now that we're seeing more and more evidence that the virus does not spread well and isn't transmitted as easily as it is indoors versus outdoors. And so outdoors is a much safer way. And as we can warm up, we can use that to our advantage and still help businesses get back on their feet again by giving them better capacity, deregulating, and partnering with them to find really solid solutions. So I feel like that this was a really good partnership with the business community. I think the city did a fabulous job finding creative ways to look at the code and what we can do to help implement this. So I'm really excited by this measure and this move, and I think it also is backed by the science that we're finding as we learn more and more about this virus, that we're finding that outdoors is much, much safer and it is much more difficult to be transmitted. Some of the evidence shows that unless you're cheek to cheek with somebody outdoors, you're most likely not going to be able to contract, but we still need to practice social distancing and not be in large crowds. But I'm excited about this venture, and good job, guys.
Councilor Linville.
I think it's a great idea as well. My question has to do with those restaurants who may not be members of the chamber, and would the applications for these considerations need to come from the chamber, or are we accepting them, and are we going to distribute the information to all restaurant owners in the city?
Thank you for the question. So it's not limited to just chamber restaurants. It'll live on the business resources page for COVID-19 assistance, and we will market it to all businesses through various channels. So we've had an ongoing newsletter every 2 weeks or so that we've sent out to businesses with updates and resources. So we'll include it there.
Thank you. I do want to say that I'm aware of several inputs on this topic that did not come from the chamber. You know, there's other people that are working to advance the interests of our business community also. I am pleased that chamber decided to participate in this, but we need to have a more robust distribution and communication than just that. So thank you, Councilor Linville, for clarifying that. And Mr. Banks, any other questions?
Okay, I'm just going to ask one, and that is about a lot of our places, particularly Village at Main, parking is very tight, and a lot of those spaces are restricted by time, so that people can get in and out. Has there been thought about how the conflicts between, for instance, a dog grooming studio place and a restaurant next door, and how if you take up 4 or 5 parking spaces for the restaurant, are you left with not enough for the other businesses in a place especially like Village at Main, where things are so tight? Or have we thought through how we're going to ameliorate those natural conflicts?
Yeah, so
For the record, before that's answered, this is Councilor Lehan's question. Thank you. Please go ahead with the answer.
Each one of those applications will be reviewed separately for all their particular individual issues. So in the instance you just mentioned, I would believe there would be some dialogue with neighboring businesses as well before anything gets approved. Some businesses are going to be more conducive to this than others. We might not be able to say yes to all of them.
I think the intent is to be as flexible.
I understand that.
Okay.
I think it's overall a very good idea, and I think there are many places where it would work out well.
Well, it will be nice to see. I appreciate the staff work on this, and yes, it's additional load on staff, I'm sure. I think it's important that we commit the resources to working with it at this point in time. So thank you one and all for that. With that, I think that we are about needing to call work session adjournment so we can get up the regular meeting. Mr. Cosgrove, anything before we do?
No, we'll send you, you should have the link for the other meeting, so, no, we're staying here? Okay, so nothing, so we don't need to do the break and the traffic controlling stuff from Andy?
They have to close that one and then get the next one, so we need about 5 to 7 minutes to make it happen.
That's what I thought, that's what I said. Okay, so we're gonna take about a 7-minute break, and then you can come back at, I would say 7:07.
7:05.
7:07.
We don't leave the meeting, we just pause it, we don't leave.
Yeah, just hang out
pause.
here, and we got to work with the
pause, okay.
falls, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to stretch your legs.
Work session adjourned at 6:58 on my clock here, and we'll see everybody in about 7 minutes. Thank you.